Dr. Sara Pugh is a well-known PhD in the quantum realm, and she's put things together that are absolutely incredible. She has her own show and where she does these interviews with amazing people. Many have also been on the Sowing Prosperity podcast, but this conversation is great. She does a great job, and I really, really admire Dr. Pugh. Dr. Sara Pugh, thank you so much for joining. I love it that you're visiting the United States, originally from UK, as we'll be able to tell here shortly. But I have followed your work. I love what you put out there, the way you question and analyze, and then make it easy to understand. So your podcast has been a amazing, resource for me to attempt to understand some of these things. But thank you for taking the time for us to dive in and learn a little bit more.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I know we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and I know that about your mission to sort of help your son, that really captured my heart. And, like a dad just wanting to learn as much as he can about how it all works and willing to dive into massive rabbit holes with Dr. Cruz and Dr. Senef and stuff like that. So, yes, it's been an interesting journey for you.
It to say the least. So what really got you to question from more of a conventional education and go into things that are, thought of as woo-woo or fringe, or how have you gotten to the point to where you've started going down these rabbit holes?
Oh, I've always been like that ever since I was a child. Like, I'm not interested in religion, but as a child, I was also interested in ghosts and paganism and quest, because I'm from Wales, and Celtic things. And then when I was at school, I think I've always had this shelf in my life that this could be bullshit and everything goes on there first. And I've learned bitterly, there's no such thing as a guru or a person. Like when I was younger, I think I used to sometimes look up to older people or people I perceived to be more intelligent, and then realized, like often I'd meet them and realize actually you're just, selling a paradigm or an idea. When I did my postdoc, I think, but also when I was doing my protein folding PhD, there was just so many things where there was just people would find these funny ways to divert away. If someone asked a question, if someone didn't know the answer in, say, a conference, they just say, what's the biological relevance? So there's so many ways in which people deflect questions and make the questioner look stupid. Then I think the real culmination of it was when I did a project on statins and heart disease. Well, statins, heart cells, caveoli, and cholesterol. And I could then look into how desperate pharmaceutical companies were to fund projects, and how they would literally say, oh, here's the hypothesis, just make some data to fit it. And they were desperate for any kind of information to say statins were good. So we did a project on beta 2 receptors in the heart, and it was all just finding random ways to show that somehow statins made some kind of benefit. So it was basically clutching at straws to build a narrative. And obviously these kind of scientific behaviors can get burnt down later because it's built on bad foundation. And I think after that, I left to do things more holistics, like being a Pilates teacher and doing hypnosis and stuff like that. And I think when you can go into the right and left brain world of people, you can see how, yes, of course, some stuff goes overly excessive to be woo-woo, but within that there's lots of truth. But then people who are too scientific, they also completely miss the point as well. So I think it's just, I've always been like that. And the more I learn, or I'm really open-minded to things, I'll never say something's rubbish until I've either tested it. But I think I'm also very much suck it and see, follow the money, anything where I have to put effort in, like seeing the sunrise or changing my way of eating, supporting local farms or businesses, which is an effort. I know that that's a good thing, or making the effort to go swimming in the morning in a lake. And whenever there's something where there's just something, I can just buy that, and there's no kind of energy kind of trade, like a supplement, I'm always suspicious. Because again, lots of the stuff to do with quantum biology and improving your circadian rhythm, you can't buy a pill or an app that can fix your body clocks. You've got to do it.
Yeah, Absolutely. So, before we got to recording, you were saying you weren't a cancer expert or regenerative agriculture expert, but what I have found is everything is hyper connected. And so, cancer is directly related to all of the mismatches, to the metabolic aspect of it. And so, that really is where I got to questioning everything was when I looked face to face to an oncologist that said, well, it doesn't matter what he eats or anything. It just do whatever they'll do. And so when I didn't accept that answer, right, it started for me with diet. Now, as we've gone into here, I understand a lot more about the environment and the terrain and all that goes into it. But understanding how wrong we are on the diet made me start questioning. And when you understand the food is a disaster, you understand the farming is a disaster. It's very, very easy. And so, a mutual friend is Dr. Stephanie Seneff, and she's done a lot of work on glyphosate. And I think that is a perfect way to dive in to connecting this. And your expertise makes it easier to understand, I believe, but understand it appropriately. So if you will, let's go into a little bit of the glyphosate issue and why that directly leads to massive problems, including cancer.
Okay, I think actually when I was doing my science degree, that's when the Roundup Ready soybean had just been released, and it was viewed as this amazing invention because it allowed farmers to be able to drench their crops in Roundup, which is the glyphosate, but then protect the crop that they wanted to harvest. And also you can use glyphosate to make wheat and things like that ripen, if we want to use that word, early. So it looked like, oh, this is this wonderful thing where it's like a win-win. And the reason it was allowed through, people didn't think it was dangerous because it inhibits an enzyme called EPSP synthase, and humans don't have that because it's part of the shikimate pathway. So it kind of slipped through the regulation. So it was never tested properly because it was assumed, well, it can't hurt a eukaryote or a person because we don't have that enzyme. But unfortunately, because they didn't test things properly, and Monsanto became very wealthy very quickly because, yes, it did generate a lot of sales and income, it gave them power to be able to try and get rid of people who wanted to oppose any of the possible dangers, and it allowed them to have a control. So as I said, very importantly, we always must follow the money. And scientific research, as I mentioned at the beginning, the big food and big agro and big pharma have got their fingers in the pies there, so they're controlling that. So there's several problems with glyphosate. So first of all, it can really disrupt sulfate signaling in the body. It makes something called deuterium be more problematic in our cells. And also it disrupts our microbiome in so many different ways, from making hydrogen to making things like B vitamins. It also disrupts things like our collagen structure because it can substitute in there instead of a glycine, we've got a glyphosate. And again, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, as I know she's been on your channel, and the more I look at glyphosate and talk to her, it's like everything. You can kind of it's possible to try and pin everything on one molecule, but the more molecules I learn about, the more they're kind of linked up. So obviously glyphosate and deuterium, it makes deuterium more problematic. But I think the insidious part of the glyphosate is that the more we learn about it, just in terms of, you mentioned, it disturbs the TCA cycle, which is what powers the mitochondria. It's a mitochondrial toxin. And again, with cancers, 85% or more of them, probably more, are all linked back to the mitochondria. So if we've hurt the mitochondria, then we're wide open for cancer. If we encourage deuterium to not leave the body properly, we're wide open to cancer. If we disrupt collagen and water in the body, we're wide open to cancer, because there are different sort of studies and people who've looked into cancer and find that the cells tend to have lost a lot of their water. So every aspect that could go wrong in the body, we can pin it on glyphosate. But then there are other players that are all pile in this as well. Like, I'm sure iron dysregulation, this is sort of other people's areas like Morley Robbins, there'll be something that glyphosate does that then causes us to accumulate more iron and deplete copper. And they're both really important. So too much iron is just dreadful in the body, and it's just like deuterium. It's a monster, but it's not evil. And again, if we lose our copper, then we haven't got the ability to regulate oxygen properly and iron. So again, that's just another piece in the puzzle of finding all of these different things which make a cancer situation worse. Because that's why I say I'm not an expert in it, because I'm not. There are just multiple things in life that we can do or expose ourselves to by accident that could collectively cause a person to develop a cancer. So it's about finding all of these and taking them away to make the likelihood of the cancer developing less likely. But also everything also pins back to the mitochondria. So we always need to think, okay, how is this particular molecule or compound affecting the mitochondria? Because without energy, we don't have the power to overcome these onslaughts in the body. And I think the other thing about the glyphosate is that even if people just think, well, it's I don't really eat fruit and vegetables very much, so I'm not going to be exposed to it. It's going to be in all of the grains, because like I mentioned, it can make grain be able to be harvested sooner and make bigger, whatever they call kernels. So it's going to be in all the processed food. And like you said, nobody mentioned food. And I know doctors who are oncologists, and they never ask their patients, what are you eating? And then they feed them glyphosate-laden food in the hospitals, which would be grains and sort of processed fruit, non-organic produce that's had glyphosate sprayed on it. But the other big problem with glyphosate is this idea that it's safe because we don't possess the EPSP enzyme means that people spray it all over their backyards and children play in it. It's a pretty tough molecule. So we basically excrete it out whole. So it's not like DDT per se. We don't know yet whether it bioaccumulates, but it could do. But it's not being broken down. It's just being circulated round and round. And it's possible that an acetobacter or something like that could break it down. And I think the problem with glyphosate is it's so endemic, and along with other factors that we know about that are problematic for health, it just potentiates things, and it's basically opens people wide open to things like autism, because Dr. Seneff's written a sort of novel all about how high levels of glyphosate and low levels of sulfate can lead to autism, and there's a catastrophic rise in that as well. So I just think, like, understanding glyphosate and appreciating that, not to get in a big panic, oh no, it's dangerous, but think, okay, I might change my way I garden in my own backyard. So you don't need to have like an allotment or anything. You can help people by just not using it in your backyard, or making sure people don't spray it in parks where children play and stuff like that. So that's sort of, in a way, to explain what glyphosate does, some of the systems in which it affects, but also what you can do and how you can avoid it, because it is avoidable once you know where you might find it.
One thing that I've come across is that the potential for humic complexes helping to detox the glyphosate might be a promising area. But are you aware of a good way of detoxing in a safe way? I mean, obviously we got to cut it out, limit it as much as possible. But how can we get it out once we have some in us?
Okay, because fortunately it does move its way through the body. So I'd think about not putting any more in is more important. And yeah, things like fulvic acid and humic acid, that they can be safe ways to help it shuttle it on out quicker. Obviously, building your exclusion zone water by doing quantum practices, more grounding, more near infrared light from the sun, minimizing your exposure to tech means you've got the correct internal hydration to move other things other than glyphosate out. But also the exclusion zone water stops big molecules like glyphosate getting into places in the first place, because like I said, it will travel on through the person. So first of all, it's about testing to make sure you do actually have some, and then I would just really drill down on not putting any more in, and then just using sort of sensible detoxing procedures like saunas, which have other benefits other than detox, building your exclusion zone, making sure that you distill your water, because people always forget that in certain places the glyphosate's in the water supply as well. So you have to just make sure you block all ways it can get in. And a lot of, I mean, it doesn't have to be a sauna. It can be playing squash to sweat, or soccer, or any kind of training. So and then, yeah, fulvic acid, humic acids, that's all great as well, because they're sort of trace minerals. So they have sort of other functions as well. And like anything, the more stressed people get about something they've been exposed to, it actually is counterproductive. So you've got to accept this has happened. I didn't know, now I do, and do basically a quantum jump into a new sort of reality, or a new multiverse per se, in your head, and just start a journey to get rid of it. Because as soon as people get stressed, they actually shut down their sort of detox pathways, because they've jumped into out of the parasympathetic and into the sympathetic. Anything that you can do to improve your sleep is always going to help with any kind of detox, because that's when the body does it, when we're still and not moving about. It's sort of like a sort of quantum communication effect, that when we're completely still and it's dark and quiet, communication goes on at the quantum level, because the signal to noise is better, but also the body's just got a chance to do housekeeping. And then I think it would be something, because I'm not a fan of like protocols of, oh, here I've got this protocol for getting rid of mold or parasites or whatever, because those kind of things are sort of more natural. And again, if somebody's advertising a special glyphosate detoxing package for $1,000, maybe just email Dr. Stephanie Seneff and say, what do you think about this? Because she's very passionate about glyphosate, and I've never heard her tell me of a protocol. And if there was one, it would exist. And I would just say, be careful of people trying to pretend they've got the solution to the glyphosate, because that's also a problem as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I like that how you put in that point of the once we're aware something may be an issue, it can just be like this just downfall. I know when I got my tests back for MTHFR, so homozygous on one and heterozygous on another, I went into this and then tried to start fixing it myself, with all these methylated B vitamins, and it was a disaster. Like, it was just a nightmare because anyway, so I understand exactly what you're saying. And then after talking to Morley, he really helped me kind of calm down on that. And
I was going to say that with methylation, like 60% of the population are a single homozygote, and that the enzyme in that pathway is that powerful. It actually doesn't do any harm to have it working 75% or even 30%. And also those pathways are sulfur and copper driven anyway. And the sun ultimately controls methylation, and so do the gut microbiome. And this business about the methylated B supplements, now you're just putting a load of deuterium loaded methyl groups in, and who knows what those might do. And then these B vitamins can then disrupt other minerals as well, because the biochemistry is very intricate. And I think a lot of it's about stop getting in the way of billions of years of evolution by trying to be too clever. And I always think it's all about just educating people. Don't let people, I've had people say, oh no, I've got the MTHFR gene. It's like, well, everybody has, and I need more methyl group, I need more this because I've got high homocysteine. It's like, well, it's nothing to do with that. And it's back to what I was saying about, if something involves buying a supplement because somebody's going to make money, it's probably not the answer.
Yep. No, I think you're spot on. I think that's the methylation is still something that I have a hard time fully grasping, but it's we're getting there. I want to jump back to the water just a little bit. When you talked about the distill, you had put out a Instagram video, I believe, about the distiller and making it really easy. It was like a cheap Amazon one. Mm-hmm. So I actually went out and got one of the cheap Amazon distillers. What those leave behind is absolutely disgusting. Yeah. I will never drink tap water ever again. Why is the water such an important deal? And kind of what is the way in which you do water for yourself?
Okay, so the reason I have a distiller that's cheap is it's because it's all about helping the everyday person. And exactly as you said, people are very visual, especially when you're teaching lay people. You have to show them something. And the reason you want to do that with the water is you want to get as much of it out as possible, because goodness knows what's in the water. There are things which we have a test in the UK. You test for certain things, but what happens if the chemical is all brand new and you don't know what you're testing for, because we don't really know what's in the water. And then there are funny goalposts of what's allowed in and what's allowed and not allowed in. And then there's obviously the idea that fluoride should be there because it's good for teeth, so people don't bother to try and control that. So just in terms of really simple things, with an ordinary tabletop distiller, that's like a beginner thing, and you know, they're like $150, and all you do is you run it, and then the water evaporates, and whatever was left behind, which will vary from city to city, state to state, and then you've got empty water. And for remineralizing, people make a massive fuss about it and think there's some magic recipe that I've got for the best mineral water on the planet. But all you've got to do is put some magnesium, some sea salt, and some potassium in, and then any other mineral in a small amount that you fancy, because you need to drink the water. And if you put a load of too much in, it'll taste horrible. So all you're doing is you're re-adding minerals that would have been there anyway, and you can sort of, like sea salt, a good one is sort of quite broad in the amount of minerals. And then, like I was saying, a lot of people do have potassium and magnesium deficiency, so it's okay to put a little bit in. But if you put too much, the water will be undrinkable because it's horrible. And then that's all it is. You can put it out in the sun to structure it, because that's just putting structure in, is like sort of energy and information. So it's not a magic process. All we're doing is making the water be like it would be out in nature, sort of swirling around in a stream or in a well exposed to sunlight. Whereas when water's been treated, it's been bashed around in metal pipes, and it's been boiled, and it's been treated and acidified. So it's kind of not how it would have been in nature. So the idea of adding minerals and putting your water out in the sun, it's just making it be how nature intended. We're not trying to make some kind of sort of magic water. And again, that's pretty much free, because minerals are really cheap, because they're not sexy. And a little bit of mineral goes a long way, and then the sun shines free. So that's, again, just anybody can make clean water, and that's what I'm all about. It's making these health things accessible to everybody, rather than just people that have got money.
Yeah. No, I love it, and it's simple, but I think the water is such a massive, massive deal and fundamental. I mean, that's like, if not the first thing that we need to get right.
Exactly. I think fluoride's such a big, massive problem, because it messes up thyroid. And that, as you know, when you've got a thyroid issue, that opens you up to cancer later along the line. Then fluoride steals electrons because it's very electronegative. So that's going to be depleting your electron pool. So you've not got the power to sort of, the body doesn't have the power to run all of its chemical reactions properly. So it's like an overworked airport. Eventually, some members of staff are going to make a mistake. And then it's like the body, the less electrons and energy it's got to shut down some of its reactions. And what it perceives to be important is purely to do with survival. And again, we want everything functioning properly everywhere. So all of the biochemical reactions are smooth and in time, not, like staff who are places that are overstaffed and overworked. They make mistakes, and then accidents happen. Say in an airport, an aeroplane could catch fire or take off at the wrong time. It's the same as in the body. If we don't have enough electrons, we can't run sort of our fundamental processes. And if we want to just boil everything down into simple language, when you don't have enough electrons, you're going to have inflammation. And then again, inflammation or chaos is another big driver for cancer. So, and then I think getting the clean water without the fluoride, it's like everything you say, everything all links up together, that everything all comes back down to, well, how much electrons have we got to run all these processes in the body, and how big can we make the water battery? So anything that steals electrons is going to, again, open the body up, not just to cancer, anything. I mean, it can be an autoimmune situation or whatever there are sort of predispositions to.
On the fluoride topic, what are your thoughts on iodine, and say what, like Dr. Brownstein has said, and more of the high doses of iodine as a way of detoxing that? What's kind of your thoughts on that area?
I don't for 1 minute doubt that iodine can elicit detox effects, and it can also stabilize proton wires in the body, so it can alter the structure of water and hydrogen, so you do get an energy boost. But I think, like anything, it's context dependent and person dependent, because too much iodine can inhibit the thyroid gland or trigger Hashimoto's, which isn't really the body attacking itself. It's you've done something and the body's mounting a reaction to tell you, I don't like this. And a lot of trusted people, you've probably heard of Dr. Naisha Winters. She's not a proponent of using this high dose iodine because she has tried a lot of things, and she had cancer when she was 19 and she's still here in her 50s. And she just said that, yes, sure, there are protocols, but it's all back to, it depends on the context. It depends on how much iodine the person's got already. There are all different kinds of cancer patients, like a child versus a senior. It depends on people's sex hormones. It depends on lots of things. So I think in sensible amounts, you say, it's not possible to kind of filter and distill your bath water. So you could put iodine in the water because it's going to outcompete the fluoride, just because there's more of the iodines there. And also, when your body takes iodine in through the skin, it tends to only take in what it needs. Whereas if you take it orally, you're flooding the system with iodine. And also, I'm just very suspicious these days of any kind of mega dosing anything, like the whole vitamin C thing. I'm not for that. I mean, yes, it might have uses if it's IV. The whole vitamin D nonsense. That's how Jim Stevenson got into vitamin D, because huge doses of vitamin D supplements nearly killed his wife. So again, mega dosing zinc, that's just disturbing a really intricate seesaw of copper and a zinc and other things. So when it comes to mega dosing iodine, I'm not sure. I have to base it on a person by person basis. And that's why these days I've got really careful of what I say on podcasts, because people just might go out and just take loads of iodine and then have a horrible reaction, because sometimes people don't realize how much it's going to detox, and you don't know what you're holding in your cells, and you might not be ready with binders or a sauna. And also with things moving around in the body, you can disrupt toxins or all sorts of things, and they move and they go somewhere worse. And I just think it's something that is like anything, even red light panels. I'm very wary now what I say, because there'll always be somebody who takes everything to extreme and hurts themselves and then spoils it for everybody else. Because sure, I've heard of protocols when people have used iodine for breast cancer, but then there are lots of different sorts of breast cancer, and it depends what drove the cancer in the first place. Because if it was a blue light driven cancer, then I don't see how iodine can help that. You need to find the source of why did this happen in the first place, and make sure the things that were driving that particular cancer have now been removed, not trying to just get rid of it, because the environment in which the cancer developed is still there. So that's my thoughts on iodine. Like anything, I'm not against it. I think it's useful, but also I just think everything in excess and fiddling about with things when you don't understand them without proper labs or anything like that. I mean, yeah, sure, there are people who are biohackers, and I always run lots of labs when I've got the chance, and I'll do something and then see, what happened. But for the regular person just listening, I just be really careful. But again, just be open-minded about it.
Yeah,
what are your
absolutely.
thoughts on iodine?
I've had access to some of Brownstein's like classes, and it's really fascinating. I mean, Guy Abraham, when he came out, way before Brownstein with it, it's just, it goes back to me on a lot of the minerals, though. It's magnesium, it's copper, it's iodine, it's all of them that we are completely depleted of. And I think that that seesaw you're kind of talking about is like, we are so deficient in most everything that we see a benefit in all of them. It just depends on like who you talk to, if it's Carolyn Dean or Morley Robbins or
Yeah, it's going to be
Dr.
magnesium or
Brownstein.
copper. But also it depends on,
Right.
you have to understand the reason why you got low in that mineral in the first place, not just keep stuffing more in. So we can't just keep blaming, the soil's empty of minerals. It's the animals are not making as much vitamin A and whatever as before. There are lots of things that people don't realize, that stressing about stuff that's not important and not dealing with mindset has soon as you do that, you've just lost a load of magnesium. So it's like the colander, like the water falling out the bottom. You can't just keep putting more water in the top, plug up the holes. And then the same with copper. There are things like taking too much zinc supplementing, as you know, is going to affect, it upregulates a protein that binds to copper. And then again, excessive vitamin D supplementation is going to cause more potassium loss at the kidney. And there are all sorts of other little nuances. And it's just about sometimes stuffing more minerals in isn't the solution. Why don't you work more on what's stressing you out? Because sure, we all have stress, but the way in which I respond to things nowadays, and obviously you've been through a massively stressful event, you can learn not to react to something, even though it's exactly the same thing that I encountered 5 years ago. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Whereas 5 years ago, I'd be running around like a headless chicken, using up vast amounts of magnesium. So I think there's also like other, blocking up the things that are stealing the minerals, like glyphosate, for example, that chelates a whole load of minerals and it disturbs everything. Take away the reason why something's being depleted, not keep on trying to put more in. And also get proper lab tests. Like people test the wrong thing. You're meant to test like magnesium in the red blood cell, not the serum. And people will often say to me, oh yeah, I want to buy a Hydrofix. And then I'll say about some other question they had, and they don't even have proper labs. So they won't buy proper labs to kind of, or get an oat test or some kind of a Dutch test or something to unpick what's going on. They just want to buy something that's 25 times the price. So I think always, try and understand what's not quite right in your body, and why the minerals escaping. Also, if people don't conduct electricity very well, because they've got poor redox or low in DHA, that can affect how well they hold on to minerals. Or if they've never grounded or never ground, again, that's going to affect how the minerals are in their body. So there's always other factors to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that the more that I have dove in, and I think we're over 100 episodes now of just absolutely brilliant people. But what I also think I've found is that nobody has the complete picture.
I completely agree. I don't. And I don't think anybody's a guru. And yes, Morley is brilliant. I love him, but it's not just about the copper. I love Dr. Seneff. It's not just about the glyphosate. Dr. Cruz is a very clever man, but it's not just about the light. So, and it's also people easily just forget really simple things like having joy or just a good workout. So yeah, I'm the same. And also there's so many more rabbit holes and pieces of the jigsaw I don't know about yet.
Yes, I know. And again, I think that's why I enjoy following along with what you are doing, is like you with your own, show and podcast and stuff, like you're actively trying to continue to learn and piece things together. And I love that. Before, I know you got a heart out. Let's go through your basics. Like we have, for me, Lander is like what I lose sleep at night. He's my 10-year-old that had cancer at 5, right? And so, in order to give him the best opportunity to thrive, having a little bit of a short hand that he's been dealt, what do you suggest a day look like for him, as far as we're getting up and we do what kind of life is that laid out like?
Well, I suppose we can just start at the beginning of the day, because obviously getting up and seeing the sunrise, that sets the body clocks and it stops people looking at their phone straight away. Because like I said, every time I open my phone or my computer, there's going to be something in it to excite me, stress me out, stimulate me. And then there's going to be a whole lot of blue light to steal my dopamine. So I think getting up and just doing something quiet in the backyard, or just on, with a window open with nature. I appreciate some people don't have access to somewhere they can ground. So just go outside and just be quiet and just absorb the sunrise light, so that you can set your clocks and get your hormones and hormone cascade started. So it's basically starting the orchestra or the party. And then also we've touched on nutrition. That's kind of a big topic anyway, so I'll kind of skip over that because there are still lots of different views on that. But just eat food that is actually food, that doesn't come from a packet and hasn't been fiddled about with. and we'll just leave it at that for the moment, because I was going to focus more on light and water. So we talked already about having clean water that's been distilled and remineralized, and that's really cheap and easy for people to do. So the next thing I think is important is going out in some form when the UV light's out, because that's going to switch off hormones that we switched on earlier, because we don't, it's like leaving the lights on all day in the house. We don't do that. We switch them on, do whatever we want in that room, then we switch them off, because it wastes energy and it's just not necessary. That's exactly the same as the body. Or also all of the mood hormones like dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, obviously later on in the day, endocannabinoids, alpha MSH and Kephalin's endorphins get made in the UVA. And I think I mentioned before about having joy and being happy is really important, especially for your son or for me, that if we can make our own pharmaceuticals in our heads, our own pharmacy, and feel happy and feel good, being in a good mood and happy and joyful biochemically, as well as doing our gratitude and quiet time is really important. Because if you don't feel good, then what's the point? So that's why I'd think not to neglect the UVA, because our mood matters a lot, along with the other things which UVA produce. And like you alluded to, being able to get good sleep is absolutely vital. And good sleep starts in the morning. So if the body clocks are out of sync because you missed the sunrise, you've disrupted them, you've disrupted thyroid. And like I said, that's a really important sort of key energy molecule along with dopamine. Then the UVA rise is really important for being able to make serotonin, which is going to turn into melatonin for sleeping later. I know that lots of other cells in the body make melatonin and the mitochondria make it during the day, but that's different. That's not for sleeping. That's for repairing. Then the other thing which is important would be vitamin D exposure via getting UVB light, because like I said, being able to make your own vitamin D is vital, because if you go down the supplement trap and take vitamin D supplements, you're just going to dysregulate all sorts of other things. And again, just because someone lives in the UK or Canada or whatever, we don't have vitamin D all year round, but we can make enough and then we store what we need. That's for a whole other podcast. So again, not being worried about taking your clothes off or some clothes off and making your own vitamin D. Because yes, it is really important in preventing cancer, but it means it's your vitamin D, not the chemical. And then I'm a big proponent of movement being really important, that, it's not just about, biology. Like, say, if we just use your son as an example, the ability to have a good movement vocabulary is really important, because then it's much easier to avoid pain later. Like, if you can move well, you can play, you can pick stuff up, you can play with your kids. You might be the kid that wants to play, because again, pain, like depression or anxiety, no matter how motivated you are, if people are in pain, it's really hard to do all of these things. So I definitely say find some, teach your body different movements, whether it's dance or Pilates or all different sports. Maybe your son, for an example, expose him to a variety of different sports, so that he builds a big movement vocabulary. But then from a quantum perspective, when we move, collagen's piezoelectric, so it's just a way to make more electrons, and it's also good for mood. And then I think also other basics would be about blocking blue light, because it not only steals your dopamine, it makes your vitamin A or your retinol, it damages that. And a lot of people already are frightened of vitamin A or real retinol from food. They're already low on it. So when you just blast out your last remaining bit of supply with blue light, you're opening yourself up to everything, because vitamin A is an anti-proliferative hormone. So it's actually anti-cancer. So we want to protect our vitamin A. Also, we can't see properly without it. So again, being able to see, or vision, is really, really important as well. And then as it gets later into the evening, if we are exposed to too much blue light, as the listeners probably know, on the skin or in the eyes, it's going to mess up all of the melatonin, and then it's going to, the brightness of light in the evening, if we expose ourselves to too much bright light, that'll be a red light panel after sunset. The brightness can trigger sort of cortisol pathway and keep you awake and tank your melatonin. And blue blockers, and just having discipline about screens and TVs and stuff in the evening, it's not just about buying stuff. Yes, you can buy blue blockers, but you've still got to be away from the bright light in the evening. So it's about finding something else to do, not just using TV to entertain yourself. So maybe talk to your partner or play with your kids. Or I take my friend's dog out for a walk. We do watch TV occasionally, but it's like a treat. We'll like do one episode of a series, but not every night, because categorically, if we do that, even if we're in bed by 9:30, we always say, oh, I didn't sleep quite as well as I normally do. Yeah. And like everything, it's like, we can't be perfect. And there's always going to be times people want to go to the cinema or have friends over or have a party. So again, trying to be perfect with all of this isn't going to work either, because being able to have joy is also really important too, especially for sort of people like your son, because I've never really talked to you properly about, how he feels right now about everything that happened and whether he really understands the implications. So maybe, you could feed back to me on my basics based on, how your son, because he's obviously a very sort of quantum and healthy person now, but how does he, or how much of this do you do with him? And have you got anything else that I've missed? Because again, people like yourself often know more than the scientists.
No, I think that you basically laid out like what we do. So I actually even homeschool them because I don't want them. My reasoning is in those blue lights at school all day. That is literally my number one reason for homeschooling.
I agree there. I just wanted to chime in there because I do get lots of teachers from different countries, and the way the children are forced to use iPads, and it's not just one iPad, it's 20 iPads, so it's bad for everybody and the teachers. And also they have hardly any playtime, and they all just eat their food inside. So before we even get to the information that gets put into children's heads, and for people homeschooling, I've always, because I don't have children, but it's one of those things I'd love to teach the next generation, not to, be a guru, just to explain to them, this is how science works. And, I can teach you better than the sausage factory.
I think that is so important. No, I think that is so important because, that is the future. The future are our kids. It is that next generation. And so I recently had Jalal Khan on, and
I love Jalal.
The stuff he's doing is phenomenal. Just a good dude. But to your point is we do early morning, we go to the back porch and we sit out there with bare feet in shorts or maybe even just underwear, get sunrise, all the kids. Go through I have about an hour drive to work, but they come with me and they're playing with their bikes, they're running around outside basically all day. So basically everything you say, I do probably not as good as I should with the evening stuff, but we use candles, we don't do the lights all on, and I actually make them wear clothes to block the skin light in the evening. But something I want to go into just a little bit with you, especially for us that have more of a temperate climate, I think that you're even more extreme than I am. How do we build up melanin in a way that is really beneficial? Because I believe melanin may be one of the most important things we can focus on, that we can see, that we can detect if we're doing something right or not.
Oh, definitely, because again, we make melanin out of UVA light, and even in the UK, there is enough, because UVA is out all year round. It's just the intensity, or the UV index is going to be lower in the winter, and also some places are cloudy. And even though people try and say all the UV gets blocked with clouds, some of it still gets through. But I think for people who are thinking, well, why do you both think a suntan is so important? Because first of all, melanin can split water into electrons and hydrogen. So we're back to sort of basic building foundations of more energy. And also both of those are antioxidants. So that it's not like antioxidants you'd buy as a vitamin supplement. It's real antioxidants to bring down inflammation, which is one of the big markers for cancer or any illness. Also, melanin can absorb things not for light. It and copper basically sort of color the body, and they can absorb things outside of the visible spectrum. And in UV, so they could potentially absorb all the way up to sort of cosmic rays. But also it's like an attractive environment for metals. And because melanin's always being remodeled, and it can turn into lots of, there's a whole pathway because it's kind of related into tyrosine and thyroid hormone and tryptamine and things like that. It's like a way in which we can remove unpleasant molecules from the body. And like you said, it's actually a visible marker that this idea about, oh no tan is healthy, the human eye or human, we're just, there's a really interesting book, you've probably read it, The Case Against Reality, when it's all about, we can see how healthy somebody is by looking at their eyes. And it's not something that we do consciously. It's built into millions of years or more of evolution. But it's the same with a tan. People just automatically say, oh, you look healthy, you look better with a tan. And nobody says to the person that's gone plant-based and is white as a ghost, oh, you look healthy. So there's this inbuilt sort of understanding within our biology that having a tan is associated with health. And then we've just been educated otherwise with sun cream nonsense. And again, I feel really bad for people, say, in India or people in Africa who think having all this melanin is a bad thing and they're trying to make themselves paler and whiter. I just think that's insanity because they're taking away their superpower. And I'm all for, the more melanin, the better. But again, in climates like the UK, the problem is, sure, if it's not cloudy, it's not an issue. But if it is, unfortunately, people might have to go and get their melanin from another country. The use of sunbeds or spurty lamps, which the spurty is both UVA and B, on the positive side, it is full spectrum, but it's basically UV light taken away from the rest of the solar spectrum. But you can take a spurty outside and use it there. So you can get melanin artificially, but I would say just a sunbed on its own, it's going to make melanin, which is going to be okay, but it might not have the right information in it. But who knows? Maybe just any melanin will do. And then I know there's a study out that was out last year that melanin that's got misinformation in it is problematic. And then again, because melanin's really important for sort of it's like a backup energy source. It can remove toxic things. It can absorb non-native EMFs within reason. If we don't expose ourselves to so many of those toxins, again, rather than sort of trying to get the toxins out of us, then don't put them in the first place. Because again, if we make a tan sort of in the summer and all of a sudden by the time November comes and the tan's all vanished, you must be doing something to make that happen, because my tan will last for ages. It does fade, but I'm kind of really careful of it. So it's about, first of all, making sure that you can make an environment where you can build melanin, which again will be the UVA, because it's not just about the suntan, it's how it ties into the leptin melanocortin pathway and how leptin is really high up on the hormone hierarchy, and it controls so many other hormones, of which many of these are linked into cancer and disease. So again, just having the melanin and the melanin on its own being there and what melanin can do is really important. But the knock-on effects of going out in the sun that happen and how leptin's regulated are just as important as well. And that kind of happens in the background. But yes, exactly as you said, having a tan and be able to see it come and go is a good indication of how much melanin we've got. But also, even if somebody's got really pale skin or a Fitzpatrick 1, they're still able to tan. They just need less than maybe I would. And their body will get, it might take a little bit more time to get used to making melanin, but they have the advantages. They need less exposure to make the same amount. Whereas for somebody with darker skin, they are evolutionarily designed to be able to deal with more sunshine. So therefore, they just need to be out a bit more to get the optimum. So I think that's more to sort of cater for everybody, because some people will say, oh, no, I always burn. And I say, well, I've got lots of people who just had to spend a lot longer with making a solar callus, which would be seeing the sunrise and the red light and then slowly exposing themselves to the sun over time, versus somebody who's very melaninated saying, it's I've got that much already. I'm so well protected. They need to just spend more time out. But then there's another way around it, because I haven't mentioned cold thermogenesis, because in the UK and Scandinavia and all these countries with horrible light, it's nice and cold up there, and also it's nice and magnetic, especially for people in Iceland. So we've got the benefits of, even though we might not have the sun, we've got the magnetism, and then we've got the cold. So the cold is something that's going to produce a response inside the body where it makes its own ultraviolet light. And we've known that cells do this for ages, and there's probably more to it that we don't know. But then the cold can basically make a sunshine inside the body, so we can produce neuromelanin, which is, again, a kind of melanin, but we find it more inside the body, and it lines all sorts of important parts of the body, like it's around the mitochondria, it's in the substantia nigra, it's all over the place. And it has sort of modeling and remodeling properties, which we're just learning about now. So even if somebody, say in the UK or Canada, it might not be very sunny, it might be cold. I mean, the Canadians get better cold than the British, and obviously the Alaskans, do as well. So we can get like our UV from more than one source. We can get it from the outside, as in the sun, or we can harness the power of the cold and create it from the mitochondria on the inside. And we've got something like, I can't remember, is it 14 quadrillion mitochondria? So that's a lot of mitochondria. That's a lot of little suns. So again, with people who live in the more temperate climates, who just have to use the cold more. And there are lots of other benefits to cold thermogenesis, not just making neuromelanin. You've got like insulin and leptin sensitivity, reducing inflammation. The cold shock protein helps to organize the 3D structures of other proteins in the body. So it's basically like a general comes along and shouts at the army, and they all just stand up straight and march better. So the cold shock and heat shock proteins do that. So again, this comes back to improved efficiency of biochemical processes in the body. And there's more to cold thermogenesis. And like everything, there's always be idiots that kind of overdo it and jump into a 32 Fahrenheit bath for 10 minutes, having never cold adapted. That would be something like 1 degree centigrade, and then hurting themselves and spoiling it for everybody else. But it's like everything, it's a really important tool. Same as the sun, there are people that just rush out in it and haven't been out for 20 years, and so obviously they'll fry like a piece of bacon. So again, I think a lot of health stuff is about not going crazy and thinking, oh no, more must be better. It's about sort of moderation and being patient and gradually, bit by bit, sort of incorporating things that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful advice. So there's 1,000 things I'd love to dive into with you, but what's next for you, and where can we find out more about what you do?
All right. I've got lots of different outlets. So I just go by the Busy Superhuman or Busy Superhuman or Dr. Sara Pugh. So I've got a Substack for people that like to read things, and that's only just started. So it's all nice and simple for people, but it's not so simple it's not helpful. Then I've got a YouTube channel where that's kind of long form. I've got Instagram if people like looking at pictures and reading a little bit of content. And I've got TikTok and Reels if people prefer videos. So there's plenty of sort of information out there for people. I've got a few sort of under $100 courses for people because, like I say, I'm very much for the the everyday person to be able to be educated. And actually, quite interestingly, I do have a course that's finally got CPDs for it, or it will have soon for it. It's a quantum ketosis course. So that's for practitioners or really keen people. But that's, again, like you were saying, to get your information sort of inspected and validated, so therefore we can start to create our own information and our own education to combat, the more centralized sort of nonsense about things which, like about food pyramids and things like that. So I do have a practitioner's course out. And I think also when you get your course CME or CPD'd, it then paves the way for other means of education to be recognized. And like I said, it's sort of, I can then fight the schools and the universities, because people talk about centralized medicine, but there's also the centralized education that's just as problematic. I've got like basically something, not for everybody yet, but I've got free things, very cheap things, courses, membership groups that are cheap, something for practitioners. And, there's plenty of stuff, lots of free PDFs for people on different things and to get them started. So I'm kind of quite easy to find. I've actually been kicked off Twitter, so just don't try and look for me there.
Oh, Lord.
Well, no, they've frozen my account, and I can't, get into it, but I can't get rid of it. And they've done it. It's fine. It's like, whatever, I'll just make another one.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you do. I appreciate all the work that you put out, and it's been wonderful just having the time to sit down and visit. And the quantum ketosis, that may be something to visit on again in the future.
Oh, definitely. Well, thank you very much for having me on the podcast and for continuing to remind me to come on, because I wasn't being elusive. I just thought it's better to just do it when I'm in the US, because sometimes I get confused about time zones. And now I've lived here, there's no excuse. But it's been a real pleasure, Logan. And I'm really happy to hear about your son and how well he's doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on Sowing Prosperity. Be sure to follow along across the social media platforms, including YouTube, and be sure to go to sowingprosperity.com.